Okay, I'm going to start the recording now. Hi, it's already 55. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Pam Stenberg, and I'm really glad to see you all here for the meeting. This is unemployment insurance and how to sign up for it. And I'm with John Bloom from the Workers Defense League, and we do this once a year, and things do change with time. So,
It's
things get
recorded
better.
so you
As
can
John
watch it
was
back
just
later. I don't know if I'll be able to.
can we can we just manage? So everybody should keep their audio off unless they're asking a question. And we will have time at the end of this meeting to ask questions of John. So we're just going to run through, really quickly what the basics are of unemployment and how we get it and what it is. And then hold on. Um, and this is our agenda for today. We're going to run through it and then you will answer any questions. I mean, there are a lot. John and I had this conversation before we got together, which is there are a lot of people who have individual questions, and many times those individual questions don't apply across the board. So what we'll try to do is answer more general questions, and then you can call John because we'll put his number into the chat. You can call John, and he does answer every single phone call he gets. I can attest to that, having called him many times. So, so without further ado, if you guys want to drop your information, who you are, where you're from, maybe what your title is, into the chat, that would be great. I am Pamela Stimberg. I work at City College in Ostos. I teach English, and I am on the EC. So I'm a part-time personnel officer, and we have Lynn here, who's also Lynn Turner and Laura Stevens, who are also on the EC. And we also have Ava Farkas, who is our organizer for the part-timers. So we're really excited. I'm always excited to do this because it means you guys are going to get money. To me, that's everything. All right. So, for those of you who have been in this meeting before, you know that Social Security Act of 1935 established the unemployment insurance for people who were temporarily unemployed. And this is just basically a social safety net. And it's it is a right that we have that was established, like many, many years ago. And it's been very helpful. It was helpful during the pandemic, really helpful during the pandemic. But it's really helpful to all of us. But during the pandemic, you could really see why it's so important to have unemployment. Um, so who pays for the unemployment insurance? There's a lot of people who think that they pay into the system. The employee does not pay for unemployment insurance. It is the employer who pays. And there's different ways they pay, but when it comes to CUNY, CUNY is self-insured. So they don't contribute to a general unemployment fund. They pay dollar for dollar as your claims are made. So my unemployment insurance is paid directly by CUNY, not there's no unemployment. We don't pay into it. And CUNY is a direct payer. So that's just something to remember because it becomes part of your job, right? That you get paid for times that CUNY wants its contingency, but they have to pay for it. And this is one of the ways that CUNY pays for contingency. So I personally think it is extraordinarily important that everyone apply for unemployment. Okay.
Result in a delay or denial.
Sorry. Hold on. Somebody's talking. Wait, let me go back one. Okay. So a UI claim is 52 weeks. So if I apply today for unemployment, I will open a claim for a whole year. But the claim only gives you enough money for 26 weeks. That doesn't mean they only pay 26 weeks, because if you have a week where you partially worked, then those wages are still in play. So, for example, unemployment says you are entitled to $20,000 over the next 52 weeks. So over the next 52 weeks, I don't take some weeks or I'm paid too much or whatever. It's when that $26,000 is exhausted. So, and then after that, you can reapply, after 52 weeks, you can reapply for the next year. So, again, and you get that by working during that time and having some other earnings. So, one of the main things that CUNY uses to try to deny our claims is called reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance is only applicable to education workers. And that was introduced to prevent K-12 workers from claiming unemployment during the summer when they weren't paid. They were paid 10 months for 12. I mean, there's lots of different ways to get paid, but basically they were not working over the summer and they were not being paid over the summer, and they didn't want people to claim that time. So the rule, if an education worker is credibly informed by their employer of a position with similar earnings in the fall, then you're reasonably assured. And I'll go through that. But basically, if you come up against the fact that you have reasonable assurance from one semester to the next, you are not qualified for unemployment for the break period unless you've earned money from other places that are not CUNY. So hold on a second. So again, one of the things that John has really taught me is it doesn't have to be absolute. It can be probable. So the employer disclaims, with appointment letters that, they're subject to budget and enrollment, but it doesn't negate the reasonable assurance. I know a lot of people have said, but they said that, budget and enrollment are, I've had people tell me that, but it is not, it doesn't negate the reasonable assurance. And that's one of the things that we have to remember. Only if you're not going to get 90% from one semester to the next, like less than 90%, um is not reasonable assurance. So if you're not going to get 90% of what you earned the previous semester or the previous year, and we'll get into that, you do not have reasonable assurance. And I mean, it's a really technical term. I think it is, because it only applies to education workers. And I think that that's, kind of misguided for us. Um, so, so if you have, all right, this is the example. If you have two 3 credit classes in the fall and your department has given you two 3 credit classes for the spring, that's 100%, right? So semester over semester, um, you have reasonable assurance. If you had 3 classes in the fall and you only have 2 classes in the spring, that means you don't have reasonable assurance. So again, you have to do the math on that. I actually had to on one of my classes because I had 7 credits last year and I have 6 credits next year, and it's actually 85%. So, sometimes you have to do a little bit of math. All right. So, who is likely to qualify? Semester to semester appointments. If you have fewer classes semester to semester, fall to spring, spring to fall, then you would qualify. 1 year appointments. And there was a decision in, what was that, 2015,
Mhm.
2014 or 2015, that if you have an annual appointment, you have to be assured of the same or more classes in the coming year. So that means you add up spring and you add up fall and spring, and then, in your appointment letter or on CUNY first, you only have the fall. generally you're not going to have enough classes to cover this spring. They're not going to be equal. So you qualify because you have an annual appointment, but you're only getting a semester's worth of classes. But again, that has to do with how many classes. Multi-year appointments are relatively new. I know of a few people who have been given unemployment with a multi-year. But, again, we need to test this. John can talk a little bit more about that. NTA, again, same thing, threshold of 90% from last annual to this annual or last semester to this semester. Summer classes don't count towards any of the qualifications. So if you have some summer classes one year and not the next, those are not taken into account. It doesn't count at all. Um, which, for me, I have issues with that, but so why are claims denied? The DOL will send you a notice of determination stating that CUNY has given you assurance and that your claim for the employer is denied. I've had this multiple times. And so you have to ask for a hearing within 30 days of the date of the determination notice. And that you have 30 days. So once you get a denial from either from both schools, one school, whatever, and I want to say you have to claim, you have to fight it for both schools, even if you get enough with one, and you don't get it with the other, because that will come and bite you. I found that out the hard way. So any denial, always ask for a hearing, and then call John. That's my advice. Call John. So, so CUNY can object to your eligibility, and they can, and they can also tell you that CUNY has requested a hearing and you'll receive a hearing date. And John and I have both have the experience that CUNY doesn't show for many of these. Okay. And so I'm going to stop my share there. And any questions you have, you just put them we'll answer them, put them in the chat, or later on we'll be able to have people ask questions. So I'm going to turn it over to John.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pam. And thank you to the PSC for doing these workshops, for inviting me to share whatever knowledge I've been able to accumulate over the past many years of doing this. We're very honored to be, of service to the union. I want to start with my, usual two caveats, which are number one, I am not now, nor have I ever been an attorney. So what I'm telling you today is not legal advice. It is advice about how the law works based on our experience advocating for adjuncts and many other workers who were denied unemployment benefits. So let me just briefly state, some of you have heard me say this before, the basic qualifications for unemployment, which are threefold. One is you have to have a sufficient amount of recent earnings. Almost everybody on this call is going to have that. If you've been working for the last 6 months, 10 months, 12 months, you're going to have sufficient recent earnings to establish a claim. And how much you have in recent earnings determines your benefit rate. We can explain the details of that at a certain point later on. But you have to have sufficient recent earnings. You have to be available for and actively looking for work. So if during the summer you leave town and you go abroad, particularly, you are not permitted to claim benefits, even if you're otherwise eligible. You're not eligible for unemployment benefits if you are outside the country. Even if you're looking for work outside the country, you're not allowed to claim. So don't do it because it can get you into big trouble. And also, if you go away on vacation, let's say you go away to some summer place and you're writing the great American novel or something like that, you're not really supposed to be claiming benefits. You're only supposed to be claiming if you're looking for work. Now, if you go somewhere else to look for a job, that's okay. But the Department of Labor may ask you about that because they can tell where you're claiming from, right? When you claim benefits, you certify each week and they know where you are certifying from. So if you're in California, when you're certifying, they're going to know that. And they may ask you, why are you there? Are you on vacation? Are you actually still actively working? So you have to be available and capable of working. Also, if you're sick, if you're having an operation or something, God forbid, you're not supposed to claim while you're out of commission. Okay, and then the third thing has to do with separation. Why have you stopped working at your most recent job? For most adjuncts, it's going to be lack of work. Okay, lack of work, meaning that the job has ended, the work has ended for the summer, and you're out of work because of that. So, almost everybody among the adjuncts meets the basic three qualifications. Then there is this clause, this section of the unemployment law called 590.10, which has to do with this reasonable assurance concept. It applies to people who work for educational institutions. So it doesn't apply to educational workers as such. It applies to people who work for educational institutions, meaning grade schools and colleges. So, my example of this, for people who are not faculty, is the cooks in the faculty house at Columbia University, right? They work for Columbia University directly. They're unemployed during the summer because the university closes and the faculty house closes, and they have the same kinds of problems qualifying for unemployment as you do, even though they're not educational staff, right? Whereas those who work as, food staff in other colleges may work for Compass or Sodexo or one of those organizations. They're not going to have a problem if they're laid off for the summer because they're not working, they're not employed by the educational institution. So it's employees of educational institutions who run into this problem. And by educational institutions, we mean schools and colleges, not museums and nonprofits and things like that. So that's the situation. And with 590.10, what the law says, in summary, is if you have reasonable or probable assurance of rehire for similar services, roughly similar amounts of work, similar earnings from year to year or term to term, you can't have benefits during the breaks, during the normal breaks, summer vacation and winter vacation. We're primarily focused on summer, today. So, what that means is that if you're a beginning adjunct, you've only taught, in colleges for less than 3 years, you're only going to get appointed semester by semester. So if you taught 2 courses this semester, this spring, and the college where you've been teaching says to you, we would like you back for those same 2 courses this coming fall. And there's no reason to doubt that they're going to make good on this, right? Even if it's only oral, if it's not yet in writing, if they say it and, a reliable person, a person with the responsibility to grant you these courses or offer you these courses offers this to you, then you've been given reasonable assurance of rehire for similar services, and you're not eligible for unemployment, and you probably shouldn't apply. I don't advise every single adjunct to apply during the summer. I think it's important to try to assess whether or not you're likely to be eligible and then make that decision. So there are people who will call me, and based on what they tell me, I'll tell them, you're really not eligible. It doesn't make sense to apply. If you do apply, it's very important to just be completely, to put your cards completely on the table. Practice full disclosure. In other words, you can tell, as long as you tell the Department of Labor what you've been offered and what you've been told, they can't come back at you later and say, well, look, you didn't tell us everything you were supposed to. We gave you money and now we want it back, plus penalties and so on. So it's very important to, to lay your cards on the table. I see somebody asking online, does John Bloom have a phone number? Okay, there it is again, 212-627-1931. We'll repeat it a few times. So, okay, so that's 590.10. And they're really talking about the earnings from year to year or term to term. Now, under the PSC contract, if you've taught at a college for more than 6 semesters in a row, you're entitled to get a 1-year reappointment letter in the spring. And I've talked to a lot of adjuncts who have told me they've already received these letters. I think they started to come last week or the week before. If you have received a 1-year reappointment letter, then, as Pam said, the comparison is from year to year rather than semester to semester. So again, let's say you've taught somewhere last fall and this spring, Last fall, you taught one course. This spring, you taught two courses. They're already offering you two courses for next fall, but you don't have probable assurance of rehire for the same amount of work because you taught three courses altogether this past year. You've only been offered two so far for the fall. So that's what the Rosenbaum decision says. It says that if you're hired or offered a year appointment, the comparison between what you earned and what you are probably going to earn, what you've been assured or reasonably assured you're going to earn, is from year to year, not semester to semester. So what this means, of course, is that people who have 1 year reappointments are much more likely to qualify for unemployment because, as Pam said, they typically, almost always, almost universally, are only going to tell you what they want you back for the fall and not for next fall and next spring. Okay. So that's 590.10. Now, on the 2 year appointments, let me just say a word about that. Up until, the last PSC contract, there were 3 year contracts that people could be offered. If you had a 3 year contract, you were guaranteed a minimum of 6 credits per semester for 3 years. And that meant that a lot of people did not qualify for unemployment during the summer because they had that ironclad assurance for the 2 semesters to come that they were going to get 6 credits, of course, plus, office hour credits for each semester. In the new contract, as I understand it, people get 2 year contracts or 2 year appointments. I'm not sure which it is, but that's not as ironclad as the 3 years were. In other words, they sort of hope that they're going to give you 6 credits per semester, but it's not a promise. It's not a guarantee. It's not something that they must make good on. So if a person has a 2 year appointment, it's not certain that they're going to be getting any certain number of credits. That's my understanding. And therefore, that makes it easier for them to qualify for unemployment because it's not a guarantee of a certain amount of work. I hope I've made myself clear on this. We can talk about it more in the Q&A period. Okay, let me just also say a couple of things about positive and negative developments, maybe since we last met last summer. On the positive side, there are two things, and on the not so positive side, there are two other things. Let me start with the positive. Number one, last October, the maximum benefit rate per week rose from $504 to $869 per week. This is a big increase, obviously, makes a major difference. There are some of you who will qualify for the maximum, or some of you who will qualify for somewhere between the old maximum and the new one. It's more money and it's very good. It's a big development. It's very important. The second positive thing that's happened is that it's a lot easier to qualify for part-time benefits, for partial benefits. If you're only teaching one course per semester, you're going to be earning less per week gross than $869. And as long as you're earning less than $869 gross per week and working fewer than 31 hours per week, you're qualified for partial unemployment. So there are some adjuncts who qualify not only during the summer, but during the year. If you teach more than one course, you probably are going to exceed the $869 in earnings per week. But if you're down to one course, which some people are, unfortunately, that does mean that you'll be able to qualify for partial benefits at the same time, and that can make up for some of the lost income. Okay, on the negative side, and this is an old story, is that there are a lot of delays. There are delays in approvals or denials of unemployment, and there are delays in getting hearings when people are denied. A lot of adjuncts are denied unfairly, unfortunately, but can go on to win at hearings. And our experience in the last couple of years has been people who have been denied in July or August sometimes have to wait until December or January to get their hearings. So, you claim as long as you're out of work, you wait, you stay in touch with us. When you finally get your hearing date, you call us and we represent you. And then you'll get the money that you're owed from back when you were certified. Hopefully that's changing. The Department of Labor has taken some steps to shorten the waits, to shorten the delays, and hopefully that's going to be changed. The other thing that's very difficult, as many of you know from experience, is getting in touch with the Department of Labor. Sometimes when you apply, the application itself will include a notice to you, an email saying, you need to call the Department of Labor in order to finish your application. And then you cannot get through to them. Okay, so that's bad. And again, we're protesting that and they're working on that. But in the meantime, you may call us because we have ways of contacting the Department of Labor in that situation and getting them to call you. So we can do that. We can make that happen. Please use us if you need us. Okay, so if you're getting these messages, you have to call us. You can't certify until you speak to us. Don't spend days and days calling a million times and trying to get through. Just call our number, leave a message for me, and I'll call you back. By the way, I call back from a no caller ID remote number. I'm working mostly remotely these days. So when I call you back and you're getting a no caller ID, that's me. All right. So answer the phone and we'll talk about that. So, that it's a problem, but it's a problem that we have a fix for in the meantime. Okay, I want to just add one or two other things that I think are important to mention. One is that on your application, there are three questions that it's very important to answer properly in order to prevent yourself from getting into delay situations. They're going to ask you in the application, do you work for an educational institution? And are you between years or terms? The answer to both of those is yes. Okay, you do work for an educational institution. You are between years or terms during the summer. So answer yes to those two questions. And then subsequent to the application, you're going to get a questionnaire. Sometimes it comes by email, sometimes it comes by hard copy. The questionnaire is going to ask you, what do you expect to get in the upcoming year or term? What have you been told? This is very important in terms of establishing whether you have or haven't got probable assurance. One of the questions on that questionnaire is something along the line of, do you expect to get the same amount of work in the coming year or term as you had last year or term? And if you haven't yet been given reasonable assurance or probable assurance that you're going to get the same amount of work, you need to say no. There's a place where you can explain why, and you can say, I taught 3 courses last year. I've only been offered 2 courses by name so far this year. A lot of people answer yes to that because they hope to get the same amount of work. But they're not asking you what you hope to get. They're asking you, do you have, pretty solidly information, including the names of the courses, the names and times of the specific courses and numbers of credits for the coming year or term. So if you haven't got that yet, answer no to that question and explain why. They're not going to ask you, do you or don't you have reasonable assurance? They're going to ask you for the facts. What have you been told? So stick to the factual rather than the speculate. It's very important to do that. The other thing is that if you have gotten a 1-year reappointment letter, be sure to upload it. Send it to the Department of Labor. Share it with them, okay? Because, again, that helps you establish that you have a right to benefits. So, they give you the option to upload documents. Upload that document. Make sure that they have that in their hands. They only have the information that you're going to give them. So it's very important to give them the information that they need to qualify you. Okay, I think that I'm going to stop there and maybe hear from you. It's 3:30, so let's hear from you for the next half of the meeting and see what questions you have. Now, as I've been talking, questions have been flashing on my screen, but I haven't been able to talk and pay attention to them as I'm going along here. So maybe people can ask their questions out loud.
If you want to raise your hands and ask questions, you're also welcome to drop some stuff in the chat, but okay, Monique.
Hi, just that I think you just said there were 3 things to be aware of on the questionnaire. The first was, are you in between semesters? The second was establish probable insurance and upload the letter. Was there a third one that I missed?
So, okay, let me just repeat it. On the actual application form itself, they're going to ask you, do you work for an educational institution? Yes. Next question. Are you between years or terms? Yes. Then, subsequent to the application, you're going to get a questionnaire, which is really a 590.10 questionnaire. Because you work for an educational institution and because you're in between years or terms, they're going to ask you questions about what's coming up. And on that questionnaire, they're going to ask you, do you expect to get the same amount of work next year as you had this year? And if the answer is no so far, be sure to say that. And quite apart from that, in the application, I think itself, they say if you have documents to upload, upload them with the application. If you already have a 1-year reappointment letter, upload it. That's what I would say. So that's separate from the 3 questions. Does that make
Thank
sense?
you. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
So there's Swazette and Ian, Lynn, and Cassandra, I see. But there's also a question is, so we're supposed to say we're between terms, even if we're not. That was the question.
Well, but you are. I mean, summer is between semesters.
No,
That's
so
what
that
we're
was my
talking.
question. So what if we're not? What if we're not reappointed? We're still supposed to say we're between terms?
I
Sorry, I
would
couldn't
say
find
that,
the
yeah.
hand raised thing.
Yes, I would say that. But then you should also send them your reappointment letter, your non-reappointment letter.
No. Okay, send them that. But
Send them the
say
non-reappointment.
say we're between terms, but then show them that we're not.
Yes. Well, show them that you don't have anything yet for the next term, right? But you do work for an educational institution, and unless you're leaving permanently, you should say, I am in between years or terms. Yeah.
But
Because
what if
there's
we're
a
not?
well, because there's a chance that you will get rehired for the next semester and you're going to be looking for work for the next semester. You are in between years or terms in that sense. But be sure to send them the non-reappointment letter and explain, I'm sending you this letter. I have been non-reappointed and I do not have any assignments so far for the coming year.
What if you have decided you don't want to you're
Wait,
not willing
hold
to
on.
just wait for a I'm asking an add-on to that because I'm in the same situation. What if you're I'm not trying to just wait and maybe have a job anymore, so I need to be looking for more stable work at this.
I think I would still advise you to say that you're between years or terms. They'll send you the questionnaire. They'll ask you what your prospects are, and you'll say nothing. You'll say 0. I haven't been given anything. And then you'll qualify.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna there's another question about reasonable assurance. So Sandra Scott, and then we'll get to Swazette, Ian, Lynn, and Cassandra. But I think this is important. If you have reasonable, sent a 1-year appointment letter, classes listed on CUNY first, and you can still apply or not because we have reasonable. Can you explain reasonable assurance again, John, please?
Okay. So if you have been given, see, I think the threshold is, have you been given actual course titles that they want you to come back and teach, right? So if there's a course title up on CUNY first, that is considered usually to be probable assurance. I like to use the term probable, which I think is synonymous with reasonable to the Department of Labor. They're talking about probable assurance, which means they've given you the names of the courses and you have no specific reason to doubt that you're going to get them. Okay. Now, what would be a specific reason to doubt you're going to get them? Let's say that a year ago, they gave you the names of 2 courses. And then when the semester began, they said, well, sorry, we're only going to give you 1 of them. That would be a specific reason to say it's not assurance, because a year ago, they did the same thing and then they reneged. Okay. But it has to have happened to you personally recently. You can't say, well, 20 years ago, they reneged on a course that they had promised me, or this happens to my colleagues. No, it has to have happened to you recently. So if something like that has happened to you and you are questioning, therefore, whether this school is going to come through on the 2 courses they've named, then you can say, again, you spell out why. You can say they've offered me these 2 courses, but I have a reason, and this is the reason to doubt that I'm actually assured of them. But otherwise, I would say in general, if they name the courses either orally or in writing or on CUNY first, and you have no reason to doubt that you're going to actually be teaching those courses, you've been given reasonable assurance of those courses. And again, is it the same amount of earnings, right? And if you taught 3 courses in the previous year, you've only been offered 2 for the coming year, unless you've gotten a very big raise that raises the pay for 2 up to what it was for the pay for 3 or 90% of it, then you haven't been given probable assurance of the same amount of work, right? It's got to be for the same amount of work, or rough, or almost the same amount, 90% of the earnings. Does that make it clearer? I hope.
Yeah, you can just put your little thumbs up. All right, we'll probably get back to it again. So, Ian, you're next.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for doing this. So my question is this, and I've kind of gone through these issues before. I've actually even gone to court and met with a judge over this stuff and won part of it back. So I kind of had to go through that painful part. One of the things I found out though is that and I may be wrong, or maybe things have changed, but you have to be offered your courses, say for instance, in the fall, sometime before the end of the semester, like in May. And so I've been vigilantly looking at CUNY first and looking at my emails. And so far, I was given the 1-year appointment, but I haven't been given any courses. And this is the first time I've been given the 1-year appointment. So I have no idea what I'm getting in the fall.
But they could tell you, anytime during the summer, they could tell you these are the courses we want you for during the fall.
But what if they waited until July? Shouldn't I qualify up till July?
You qualify up until July. Okay, this is a very important point. If you don't have assurance of courses right now, you qualify right now. But the minute that they give that to you, then you stop claiming. Okay, just because you qualify now doesn't mean you're home free for the summer. All right. If they give you the equivalent, or 90% of, if they give you probable assurance of 90% of the earnings at any point during the summer, you should stop claiming. Okay. Or call me and, we can talk about whether you should stop claiming, but you should probably stop claiming. And we see this all the time. People are offered these courses July 1st, August 15th. I mean, it can sometimes be the last week, but you shouldn't claim for the last week. Yes. So you stop claiming when and if they offer you the equivalent of what you had before, whether it's 1 year or 1 semester. But you've got a 1-year appointment now. That's a good thing, because that probably means that you're going to be qualified. Because again, the comparison is going to be between everything you had last year and the coming year. They have to offer you 90% of the earnings for the coming year as you had last year, last academic year, in order for you to be disqualified, right? The burden of proof is on them.
Right. I think I understand what you're saying. It's not a possibility, it's literal. And you brought up something interesting, because last summer, I didn't receive, I was supposed to get 2 classes at the school. I didn't receive the second class until the very last week of August, and it almost blew up in my face, because I literally had to come into the chair and ask, am I getting this class or not? And he got highly upset at me over it.
Yeah. Well, if the class was in doubt, then that's different, right? I mean, in other words, if they say to you, look, we're going to want you for 101 and 102, but 102 is not a sure thing, you'll have to tell you later, that's not assurance. Okay. That's not probable assurance. But if they say to you, we're going to want you for 101 and 102, barring any unforeseen budget decisions or something like that, then that is usually considered reasonable assurance.
Right.
Probable assurance. Again, unless you have some specific reason based on your own recent history or based on their throwing significant doubt out there, which they sometimes do, then you can argue that to the Department of Labor. You, again, put your cards on the table. Say to the Department of Labor, they have said to me that they're going to want me for 101 and 102. However, they're also adding X, Y, and Z. You let them make the decision, and then if you disagree with it, you ask for a hearing.
Right. Yeah.
But that way, they can't fault you. And that's what you don't want. You don't want them coming back at you and saying, listen, you didn't tell us everything. You
Right.
withheld pertinent facts from us. And therefore, we want our money back plus 15%. That's the penalty for making a willful false statement. And a willful false statement can be an outright lie, or it can be by omission. So you want to avoid that. Okay. I mean, we get calls from people who are being hit with that all the time, and sometimes we can fight it off. But sometimes it's a problem because people will not tell the whole story to the Department of Labor, and that can get you in a lot of trouble. So, you don't want that.
Okay. Yeah. The other part that I was hearing you say, and I just want to say it just because if I don't say it, then you didn't hear it. But
Okay.
the fact that most times I'm not a lawyer either.
I'm not a lawyer, right?
I
You're
play
not a
one on
lawyer.
television. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
I've never had to wait until the last week of August. And so they actually created a situation that was unprecedented. So
Yeah.
concern now is that it's just going to happen, or am I going to have to wait? In other words, when I go back,
Well, I don't know.
and
I don't know.
And that's my point, because they're creating I don't know situation.
Okay, but look, have they told you we want you back for these? We're probably going to want you back for these 2 courses.
No, they said that reappointed, because I've never gotten the 1-year deal. I normally get something that says here.
Okay, so this year you got the 1-year reappointment. Have they named classes that they want?
No,
not yet.
no.
As long as they haven't named the classes, you haven't been given probable assurance.
All right.
Okay, that's the threshold.
Right.
Even if they say we're probably going to want you for 2 courses, if they don't tell you which ones, then that's not probable assurance in our view, and we think in the view of the Department of Labor and the judges.
All right.
But it's when they start naming the courses, that's when that's when that comes into play.
Okay. So our semester normally ends at May, which means this Sunday I should send in the
Well, you should apply right now. You should apply today.
Okay.
I've been telling people, all the colleges, I heard from Lynn Turner, except 3 are finished, right? They finished last week.
Right.
People should apply this week. The first week that you apply is called a waiting week. You don't get paid for the waiting week.
Right.
Apply today, because today is the last day of this week, right? The last working day of this week. So you apply today, and then you're going to claim, your first paid week, if you qualify, would be next week. If you wait until Monday, then next week is going to be your waiting week. So don't wait. Don't wait. Apply. Yeah.
Right.
Once you apply, you're going to be certifying every Sunday generally. And certifying means you go into your online account. Everybody, you want to apply online, create an online account. It's very simple. Each Sunday, you go into your online account. You're going to answer the same 6 or 7 certification questions every week. Did you work this past week? Did you turn down any jobs this past week? Et cetera. And the answer is generally no, and then you get paid.
Thank you, John.
Of course.
Thank you. I believe we're on Lynn.
Yeah, I think you answered a lot of what I was going to ask related to the 1 year, and I just want to see what of that applies to folks on the semester by semester. So what you're saying then, if the reappointment letter says last year appointed, but doesn't give specifics like specific classes, then you don't have reasonable assurance. The minute it appears on CUNY first, is what would be an actual indication of reasonable assurance. That?
Yeah, I would say that if that's the case, in other words, when they don't tell you we're going to want you for any specific course, and then all of a sudden it pops up on CUNY first, does that mean that they're telling you that they want you for that course, or is that just maybe? I mean, my understanding is that once it's up on CUNY first, they're telling you we're probably going to want you for that course.
Mm-hmm.
So even if they've been rude enough to not say anything to you, they're just popping it up on CUNY first, they are telling you that, and that's considered reasonable assurance. So what I've said this in past years, is that I would say to every adjunct, check CUNY first daily all summer.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want a situation where CUNY is saying, you've claimed all summer, and they say, well, listen, we put something up on CUNY first on July 1st. And you say, well, I didn't look at it. And they say, well, it was up there. So, better for you to look at it
Mhm.
and make sure that it's still blank, and then you can verify that. You know exactly when they did and didn't put something on CUNY first. But once they put it up there, I think that that's generally considered to be
Okay, but
reasonable.
until they do, as long as it's just like, yes, you're reappointed, then that would be,
Right.
would be,
If they
okay.
don't name
So
the
just-
courses, then they haven't given you this a specific enough information. Just
Okay,
because they're saying we want you back, here's a 1-year letter, that's just a letter. That's not reasonable assurance of similar services. That's not what that is.
so for those on the semester by semester, then what is the look back for whether or not you have the same course load? Is
The
it
semester.
the
It's only the semester, right?
It's this past semester?
Correct.
That's
It would
all.
be this spring versus next fall, right?
Okay, all right.
So, that applies mainly to people who have taught fewer than 6 semesters in a row, because my understanding is that under the PSC contract, once you've taught 6 semesters in a row, they must give you a 1-year reappointment letter, even if they're not intending to give you any courses. They have to give you that. Now, the other thing that I would say is that, you have to make sure when you apply, they ask you to tell them everywhere you've worked in the last year and a half. You're not just telling them about CUNY, it's everywhere you've worked. So a lot of adjuncts teach at multiple colleges, sometimes in multiple states. Sometimes you teach at other jobs. Sometimes you work at other jobs besides colleges. You tell them about that also. Okay. They want to know about all of that, and you're supposed to tell them about everything. And I had somebody call me recently and say, well, I only told them about the colleges, the 2 CUNY colleges that I taught at. I also teach at 2 colleges in New Jersey, but that's in New Jersey. So I didn't mention it because I was applying in New York. So I didn't mention it. No, you're supposed to tell them everywhere you work. Okay. If it's in another state, that's still included. Okay. And they still want to know, what did you earn? Why have you stopped working there? Everything is included. So anywhere you've worked is included. Even if it's independent contract work, you're supposed to tell them about that. So that's very important to know. Because a lot of adjuncts teach at lots of colleges, and there may be completely different circumstances in the different schools. Right? So, for example, you might teach at 2 colleges. One of them you've taught at for 10 years, the other you've only taught at for 2 years. At the college where you've taught longer, they're going to give you a 1-year reappointment letter. The college where you've only taught for 2 years, they're going to give you a semester-to-semester appointment letter, and the look back or the evaluation will be different for each one. The earnings from one might count, and the earnings from the other might not count. So, all of these can be kind of, can make it a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
I hope I haven't over answered that question.
Yeah. No, I think it's good, Sean. I mean, it's just because of 590, we have more complications. I mean, I think that this is what makes it not straightforward.
It's a hard concept to get a good grasp of. I know this because I've been explaining it for a long time. But this is what you have to try to realize, is that the benchmark is really naming the courses and how many, right? And that's really, if you can figure that out, then you've got it down. Okay, so what have they offered me? How much? And what have they actually specifically offered me in terms of course titles?
Cassandra.
Thank you so much. I think you might have answered it because you started talking about state to state. So I teach part-time in California, and then I teach remotely for CUNY as well. So I have 0 work for the summer. I can apply in both states to California.
One or the other, not both.
Okay.
Not both. You're not allowed to claim benefits in more than one state. That's illegal.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Right.
Blair.
Hi. Thank you again for doing this. So I would think I'm a pretty clear-cut case, but I want to just double check on something. I do have 2 courses listed on CUNY first. I've always had 2 courses. So it seems like I do have that reasonable assurance. But this afternoon, I received an email from the HR department at QCC that said that they're giving me an unemployment notice because of my part-time hourly position. And then they gave me an attachment, which is a form from the Department of Labor. This gives me reason to doubt it, but does this give reason? What is reasonable doubt when I'm
Yeah.
on one hand on CUNY first, and then I'm receiving a very
Yes.
official looking letter?
Right. Good point. I'm glad you raised this.
Can I
because
just point that out that they're supposed to give it to us when we're separated from CUNY for, what is it, John? Like a day,
Okay,
2 days?
so this is the answer. Okay, by law, and most employers don't do this. When a person is separated from a job, they're supposed to give you that form saying you're no longer working here. Here's a form. You have the right to apply for unemployment benefits. Now, CUNY started to send those to people both at the end of the fall semester and I think at the end of the spring semester a few years ago. That really doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you qualify. It's just a formality. It doesn't mean that they're throwing your assured courses into doubt. It's just a pro forma thing that they're sending to you because, their lawyers have told them this is a rule that you're supposed to follow. You're supposed to send this form to anybody who's finished the semester. So it's basically irrelevant to the discussion.
Okay, so if it's on CUNY first and I have enrollment, ignore this thing that I got today.
Yes, ignore
Okay.
that. But do
Yeah.
you have a 1-year reappointment letter or do you have, no, you're semester by semester?
Yes.
Yes. Have you taught for fewer than 6 semesters at your school?
It's 5 or 6. I'm at the cusp of this, but
Yeah. If you finished your 6th semester
yeah.
this spring, my understanding is that you're entitled now to a 1-year reappointment letter if they want you back. So if they only sent you a 1-semester reappointment letter, go to the union.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, because this also happens. People who are entitled to 1-year reappointment letters don't get them. The school doesn't send them. And that can affect your right to get unemployment benefits. And we can't go into a hearing and say to the judge, look, the person was supposed to get the 1-year reappointment letter, but they didn't, and therefore you should give them benefits. No, because the judge wants to know, do you have it or don't? So if you didn't get it and you were supposed to, you have the right to ask the school. Just point out to the school, look, I understand that under the union contract, I'm supposed to get a 1-year reappointment letter. May I have it? And usually they're going to give it to you because they know this rule.
I just want to share, and then I guess it's Ganesh, but I just want to share that I actually lost benefits because they gave me a semester to semester appointment instead of a 1-year appointment, and I didn't know it. So then I had to go back, get that fixed, go back, have a hearing, and eventually I won, but it was September.
Yeah. Now you want to make sure you get what you're entitled to in terms of these 1-year appointments. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're at 4, but I just want to say we have Ganesh and Arlette, and then we can
we can
wrap
have
up.
a little more and then we'll wrap up. There's always more to talk about.
Yeah, right. Ganesh.
Hi. So a couple of things. First, thank you so much for organizing this. I think was it Pamela and Lynn who organized this? Insofar as I did so, I thank you very much for doing so. This is very informative and very useful. I wish there was some kind of an adjunct fund that could tide over some of the adjuncts who are in trouble. I don't know how that will work, but just a thought that I wanted to extend. I had 2 questions for John. John, thank you again for being so informative.
Of course.
So let me just tell you as to what my predicament is. Last year, usually I teach a class in the summer. This year, my classes were canceled. They canceled at the last minute. And then at the same time, towards the end of the month in May, I received a 2-year reappointment letter. So I guess my question is, in relation to what you've been talking about, I don't qualify for, I do not qualify for unemployment insurance because I have what you just mentioned as reasonable assurance.
No. You do qualify because, first of all, you're not working this summer. correct?
Yes.
At all. Okay.
No.
So you're unemployed. That's number one. Number two, you taught this past year, right?
I taught the past year, yes.
Okay. How many courses in the fall and how many courses in the spring?
2 in the fall and 2 in the spring.
And what have you been told about what's coming up next year? Have you been given any course titles for next year?
Yes.
How many?
2 courses in the fall and 2 courses in the spring.
They've already given you the names of the courses that you're going to teach in the spring?
Not sure about that.
Well, you got to check on that. That's the key question. Okay. If you taught 2 and 2 this past academic year, and you've already been told these are the 2 and 2 that we want you for next academic year, then you're not eligible. Then you've been given reasonable assurance of rehire for similar services from this past year to next year. Okay.
Hey,
but if
can you
they
repeat that,
haven't
please?
given you,
Can
let
you
me just
repeat
finish.
that, please? John, can you please?
If they've told you
Yeah.
the names of the 4 courses that they want you for fall of 2026 and spring of 2027,
Yeah.
which I doubt, but maybe they have, okay? If they've given you the names of the courses already for the whole coming year, then you're not eligible for the summer because it's exactly the same amount of work as you had last academic year. But if they haven't given you those names, then you are eligible. Okay, that's the sort of thumbnail. The 2-year reappointment letter is not a guarantee of any specific number of courses for the next 2 years. It's not. That's my understanding of how it's defined under the new PSC contract, under the newest PSC contract. It's a hope, but it's not a guarantee. Whereas under the old contract, the 3-year appointments were a guarantee. They did represent a guarantee of a minimum amount of work. In that sense, I might be disagreeing with the person who was on before who said that even under the 3 years, if they didn't name the courses, then you were, then it didn't count. I differ. I don't agree with that. I don't think that was true, but that's in the past. Right now, there are 3-year appointments sort of piggybacking on the 2-year. But again, there's no guarantee. There's no, absolute promise of any minimal number during the 2 or 3 years coming up. So again, it's what they've told you. It's what you know and when you know it. You remember that? I mean, those of us around my age on this call will remember the famous line, what did you know and when did you know it? Okay. So that's the question here is what do you know about what they're going to be giving you? Right? And when did you find that out? If you didn't find it out until later, then that's later and you're qualified.
So, John, if the names of the courses do not exist for the spring 2027 semester, then I can apply for unemployment.
You can apply. You can always apply, but you can be eligible. That's the point, is that you're eligible for unemployment.
No, am I eligible then?
Yes, you are eligible. In other words, you can apply and you will be eligible. Okay. Applying is just the first step. It's getting the benefits that was what we're talking about. So yes, if you taught 4 courses this past year and you've only been given the names of 2 courses for next academic year so far, then you are eligible because you've only been reasonably assured of half the work for the coming year as you had last year.
Okay, so I should check to see on CUNY first if the spring 2027 courses are listed or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and then after I do that, and if
they're not there, apply for benefits.
Okay, I will do that. I'll do exactly as you suggest, and then perhaps I can, if I have any issues, may I call you at the number that you
call us? The number 212-627-1931.
And when's a good time to call you?
24 hours, 7 days.
And when's a good time to call you?
So on 24 hours, 7 days. You leave me a message, I'll call you that day or the next day.
I thank you, John.
Excluding Saturdays and Sundays.
It's always happy to go out on an up note. Okay, Lynn, if you can talk to us about the academic freedom legislation,
Yeah,
which
this will be very quick because we're here mainly for the Unemployment Insurance Forum. But this is just you may have seen if you're following social media or whatever or otherwise and the PSC information that there is new legislation that our union has been instrumental in getting put forward. It's called the Academic Freedom Protection Act, which both deals with protection for academic freedom at a statewide level, but also includes due process regardless of title, right? So adjuncts would also be included in that. And we all know how important this is given the fight around the Fired For. And it is right now, it's in committee. So we're just trying to generate at this point phone calls for this to be out of committee and move to where it's going to be discussed in the next legislative session. So I'm going to put in the chat, right, the information about this about this legislation, and also links to your assembly members, your state senators. Please call them, tell them that it's really important legislation and you want it moved to to the full discussion. So I will do that now as soon as I find it.
okay, and so we have
Already done, Lynn.
You already did
Right.
it. Thank you.
So thank you so much for attending today. I really appreciate all of your attention. And if you can pass this information on to one other adjunct, that would be great.
Yeah.
Sometimes learning something means teaching it. The
Okay.
other the right, and the other thing I want to say is we did record this. We will put it up on the PSC website. If there were some tricky parts that you need to go over again, it'll be there. You can look at it again. Yeah, we'll post it YouTube and on the website. So, and with that, I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody today, but again, I posted my email. John's phone number is in there. He will get back to you. Just leave a message. And
Yeah, stay in touch.
yeah, John, anything to say in
Yeah,
closing?
let me just say in closing, I just want to say something about something that I saw you say at the recent there was a recent forum, a recent CUNY forum or adjuncts forum, and you said something which really struck me, which was that they call us adjuncts, but that's really a misnomer because without adjuncts, the university couldn't function. You do most of the teaching. So the whole idea that you're something auxiliary is really a kind of a wrong idea, and I really think that that's an important thing to think about. And very true. And, I myself worked as an adjunct for many years, before and during the time I've been doing this job. So I do, I am familiar with the frustrations that adjuncts go through. That's one of the reasons why I like to do these workshops. So, strengthening the union and strengthening the adjunct's position and continuing to try to get improvements in pay and in conditions and in treatment is very, very important, here and across the country. So I really encourage everybody to join up and be active.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. Those are wonderful words to part on. And have a wonderful weekend. It's nice
Yes.
now. Hopefully it
Take
won't
care.
rain. Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you.